One of the challenges today in the desktop world is that we have most of the ingredients we require to build visually appealing applications, but there's a problem mixing them together. For example, most of the issues I just described already had solutions before WPF came along. Want all the designability benefits of the web? Well, there's nothing stopping you from using HTML in a desktop application. Want scalable, animatable graphics? Well, Flash does that, and you can use that on the desktop too if you like. Don't like the way that Flash's support for building normal controls like list boxes and scroll bars in a way that actually meets accessibility requirements that a lot of software is obliged to meet? Actually, a lot of developers don't even know they're legally obliged to make their software accessible, but I'm assuming you're not in that group. But if that's where you are, well, you can just use Win32. The control set that it provides is a bit pedestrian, perhaps, but all of the controls fully support accessibility, and you can be sure that the end user is going to know how to use them. Or again, if you want to take full advantage of the graphics hardware, you can do that today with DirectX or with OpenGL. But the problem arises if you want some combination of features. If you want the visual capabilities of Flash with the accessibility and usability of a classic Win32 controls, well, tough. You can't do it. Want to place Win32 buttons and list boxes inside of a DirectX scene? Well, again, tough. You can't do that either. Want to apply a Flash animation to an element in the HTML DOM? Well, again, you're out of luck. And the problem here is that each of these technologies is isolated. You can combine them into one application, but you usually have to partition the application's screen so that the area rendered, for example, by DirectX doesn't overlap with the area rendered by HTML. And even in cases where you can have a certain amount of overlap, for example, you can make Flash content overlap with HTML, there are issues with input handling. You only get visual overlap, you can't actually have proper overlap. It's a bit of a hack. And in general, you can't apply the features of one technology to elements from a different technology. There's no integration across these pieces. But WPF solves this. It may be fair to say that WPF provides almost no completely new features. Pretty much each individual thing it does has been available in other systems for a while. But its unique contribution is integration. All of these different features are available, but they're on one cohesive platform. So if you want to put a button on the side of a 3D model, you can do that. If you want to apply animations to characters in flow formatted text, you can. If you want to use scalable 2D or 3D graphics to build a custom look for some controls, but still have those controls offer full keyboard accessibility and the same feature set as the standard Win32 version of that control would, you can do that too. This integration is, in my opinion, WPF's single best feature. Composability is a feature that permeates all of WPF. And in fact, pretty much everything you use in WPF is built out of other bits of WPF. The set of primitives is relatively small. It's the composition that gives you the power. To provide a quick illustration of what I'm talking about, I've gone back into XAMLPad here. This is more or less the same demo as I showed you earlier, although if you're paying very close attention, you may have noticed that the OK text is now in the body of the button rather than as an attribute. And the reason I've done this is because I want to show you some other things you can put inside the button. The button doesn't just have to contain plain text. Button supports something called a content model. Lots of things in WPF support this, and basically it says there's various things that can go on the inside. There's various different things that can form the content. And Button's content model allows text, as we've got here, but I could put something else in instead. I could say I'd like to have an ellipse. Let's fill the ellipse in yellow. Let's give it a width of 40 and a height of 15. And you can see that the interior of my button has now got an ellipse inside it. Or I could put a bitmap in there, or I could put anything I liked in there. But I can go further than this. If I want to have a mixture of text and graphics, well, if I just do the obvious thing and try sticking OK in here, WPF will complain. It says the button already has a child and cannot add another one. Button can only accept one child. So that seems kind of limiting to start with. But actually, composition comes to the rescue yet again. The reason the button only supports one child is so that it doesn't have to be in charge of how the children are laid out. To handle the layout inside of the button, we just compose. We use yet another element. We use something that knows how to lay out multiple children. So I'm going to put a stack panel inside here and have it contain the two children. Now, for reasons I won't go into here, I'm also going to have to actually change this into something slightly more explicit. Say text block, text equals OK. Basically, it was doing that for me before, but now I'm having to do it by hand. And if I actually let this thing size itself, just say please center yourself and be as tall as you need to be, I can see that I've got my ellipse followed by my text, and maybe let's have another ellipse. And actually maybe the text get a bit more advanced as well. Rather than just having some plain text, let's do it this way. Let's make the font a bit bigger. And let's apply some markup to this. And again, we're running out of space, so let's tell the button that we just like it to position itself centrally and be as big as it needs to be. Set the horizontal alignment to be center, and it will now size to content and do whatever it needs to be. If I make the text a bit larger again, we can see we're starting to get somewhere. So what I've done here is I've taken a basic control. I then told it I'd like to use a particular layout algorithm, in this case a very simple vertical stack, but there's other ones we could have used here. And then inside that, I've used some graphics and then some formatted text and then some more graphics. And if I wanted to have video in here, I could do that as well. If I wanted to have bitmaps in there, I could do that. If I wanted to have 3D, I could put that in here as well. Essentially, anything goes. The button is happy to have anything you like as the content. I can compose all the different styles of content that WPF supports inside the button. And that's what integration is all about. That's the composability of WPF in action. And it's this endless capacity for composition that gives WPF its power. And from my own experience, it's the feature I miss most when working in other user interface technologies.